Welcome to BizTech Forward, your go-to podcast for cutting-edge insights at the intersection of business and technology. Join us as we explore the trends, innovations, and strategies shaping the future of the digital world. Let's move forward together.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of BizTech Forward. I'm your host, Anni, and today we're going into the dynamic world of marketing and data. Marketing has always been key to business success, but now data and technology are really transforming the game. And this is what we want to talk about today. Joining us is Scott Rayburn, VP of Marketing at DataArt. Scott has loads of experience in B2B digital marketing, as well as Martech, SEO, and sales enablement. Hi, Scott, and welcome to the show.
Hey, Anni, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Brief introduction. Scott is a senior marketing leader with over 12 years of experience in B2B digital marketing and almost 10 years of experience in various marketing roles in the IT services industry. Prior to DataArt, he served as marketing director for a mid-sized IT services company, and prior to that, he served as a marketing manager for a very large IT services company. Again, Scott, welcome to the show. I'm really happy you're here. We will talk about how the past, present, and future of marketing are shaped by data and technology, and why it's such an exciting time right now for marketers in the B2B world. Let's get right to it. Scott, let's rewind like 15 years ago, 2010, let's say. B2B marketing has evolved so much since then. Walk us through the past a little bit. So how was it back when you started?
Yeah, so indeed, now is an exciting time to be a B2B marketer. And back then, I think it was exciting too, because things were changing, right before my eyes. I noticed very quickly when I entered the B2B marketing space how different it was from the B2C type of marketing that I was seeing in front of my eyes every day, ads for soft drinks and shoes and all of these other things, the commercials you see on TV. We had none of that in B2B when I started. It was very kind of boring, static, don't offend anyone. It's better to just keep a neutral, even tone and, rely on those long relationships to sell. And it still works today, but it's changed a lot. Anyway, thinking about the past, something looking back that I noticed is a lot of those B2B websites from the 2010 era were actually a lot closer to the Web 1.0 than they were to Web 2.0. And what I mean by that is they were just very static sources of information, tons of content, tons of notes that you can use to make a decision, but very little in the way of customer engagement, customer interaction, what we call now kind of digital experience or customer experience. B2B was lagging behind. So that's one thing I would note for sure. It just was a very kind of stark underinvestment in that sort of customer experience.
Right. That's really a big contrast. I actually read that, back in the early 2000s, Martech was barely a concept. And I wonder, is there an example you could give us from that stage of your career?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, if you think about what Martech was, it really comes down to your company's website, like the company's digital presence. There were some other tools involved, thinking about the technology stack of a B2B company back then, you could consider Google as part of it. How do I get listed on Google? Something funny from early in my career was what's called these black hat SEO techniques, which is, in other words, not the most ethically savvy way of doing things, where you would just cut and paste hundreds of keywords onto some landing page. And it actually worked. You could get ranked on the first page of Google just by doing something simple and kind of sketchy. Today, you might get blacklisted. Another thing we were doing back then was just buying these huge lists of people. You could buy 10,000 contacts in X industry and send them email blasts. And when I first started, this was somehow legal, somehow kind of allowed. But quickly we started getting blacklisted. I remember one of our servers, we had a physical server in the office. It got blacklisted um, due to this kind of activity. Anyway, I'm not sure if I should be revealing this on a podcast, but it is relevant. I mean, I think this does kind of define the state of Martech in the early 2010s, where it was almost like a Wild West situation. Anything goes, anything you can do to get results and break through the noise. It wasn't anywhere near as formulaic as it is today.
Yeah, I love that Wild West comparison. I actually also read in preparation for our chat, I saw a fun stat that like in the early 2000s, like fewer than 20% of companies had any kind of CRM system in place, which is like unimaginable for right now. And I wonder, like, how did they even keep track of customer relationships back then? You know?
Yeah, I mean, it was just like case by case, like, oh, this person came back. That's great. It was,
Yeah.
it wasn't so, customer life cycle marketing was not as established as a concept, right? And I mean, still today, I think many companies are cleaning up the mess from those days where the CRM was just growing out of control. There was no, what like, we call it data hygiene, keeping that data clean. And still, people are trying to recover from those times even today.
Speaking of today, so that we don't spend loads of time in the past, I do wonder how things are going today. So, Scott, what stands out to you most about how B2B brands approach marketing now?
So, stepping away from pure technology for a moment, I do see some really huge changes in B2B investment in branding, in company image and reputation. And probably one of the best examples of this is just these sponsorships that you see everywhere. You know, Salesforce, Oracle, AWS, all these companies are sponsoring arenas, race cars, huge events, all these very kind of consumer focused sorts of activities. And it's pretty interesting because as a consumer, I'm not going to go download, Salesforce on my phone and create like a CRM of all my friends. Like, I don't need to do that. I don't have that many friends, unfortunately. But anyway, like, it's not a thing that consumers do, but yet you see these B2B companies are just dominating the airwaves. They have commercials and, it kind of makes you wonder, why is that? How does that work? How do those investments eventually pay off? What is going to be the ROI of those investments? And the way I think about it is kind of like a demographic shift where, earlier in my career, in this kind of Wild West time, the decision makers were not digital natives. They were kind of comfortable coming from a Web 1.0 world or a world that was dominated by like print advertising. Whereas nowadays it's a world where most decision makers in B2B are closer to digital native. Maybe not full digital native, but the internet came about when they were still somewhere near their formative years, I guess, so to speak. So when it comes to all this advertising, all this brand building, I think it's just trying to get on the radar of people who could become customers in the future for B2B companies or people who are decision makers today. And it's this repetition. Like, I see the name here at the arena when I go to the sports game, and then I see it on the commercial, and then I see it in some emails, some ads on LinkedIn. And, this sort of omni-channel approach to B2B marketing has become huge. And this is in stark contrast to when I kind of started my career in B2B and then B2B tech. because these sorts of marketing investments were very few and far between. Only the biggest of the big, the top consultancies and others were really making these investments.
Right. So in general, you would say that B2B marketing is going in the direction of B2C today.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's very interesting to see this unfold. And frankly, I think it's really elevated marketing's position in the B2B organization. Whereas before it was kind of, what's the minimum we can spend on marketing and still exist as a company? Nowadays, it's a lot more, marketing-led, brand-led sorts of companies. And what's changing too, going back to technology, is kind of the Martech and the data-driven approach that enables companies to understand how those investments are paying off.
Right. Scott, this is an excellent bridge to my next question. You mentioned this magical word data. So technology is everywhere, but data specifically seems to be everywhere these days. So would you tell us a bit more about that? What kinds of data are marketers using today?
Yeah, great question. So, first of all, I think I need to shout out the discipline of marketing operations. It's fascinating. This kind of part of the marketing department didn't really exist until around 2008, 2009. But these are the folks who are really, really committed to making the marketing department more data-driven, making it more efficient, and implementing all of the Martech that kind of collects, ingests, and actions or creates insights from the data. So just thinking about data, it's everywhere in modern B2B marketing. So starting at the top of the funnel, you have awareness data, like how many people know you exist. Is that number growing? How much does it cost to grow that number? These things can be answered with, Martech and data. From there, going down the funnel, someone knows you exist. They come to your website or they interact with an ad. This could be considered experiential data from someone's browsing history on your company website. What did they do? Did they run away screaming or did they fill out that form? And then filling out the form, this is kind of getting deeper into the funnel with your conversion data. What are the conversion rates? For example, if your page has like a 0.3% conversion rate and the industry standard is 2%, and you have those benchmarks available, you can probably learn pretty quickly that that page isn't working. There's something wrong with the content, the design, the flow, or there could be some like technical issue too, like it's not loading fast enough. So, all sorts of data-driven insights that you can get on that piece of the sales funnel. And then finally, there's data around kind of the bottom funnel buyer journey, going from like the sales qualified lead to the opportunity to the actual sale to the customer lifetime value. This is kind of the buyer behavior slice of data, and marketing can look at that and start to make decisions around like, okay, at what point do we provide some sort of special retention offer for the customer? Or what kinds of customers are just a lost cause? Unfortunately, right? Like there's no reason to continue to invest. So, this is all data driven. And I think things that used to be a lot more of a gut feeling, like you just say, oh, we know these types of buyers don't buy from us because X, Y, and Z. Well, now you can have, half a decade of data that backs that up. And then you can also observe changes in that data with analytics. And, it's just fascinating. It's very interesting.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, why now? Why the data-driven boom right now? Like, what was it like before? And you say, heavily reliant on the gut feeling, as opposed to we don't need to rely on our gut feeling anymore at all.
I think it goes right back to technology. obviously, like technology is the foundational enabler of this kind of data-driven approach. And thinking about Martech specifically, um, I was actually kind of like blown away to read that in the 2010s, there were only a few hundred so-called Martech tools on the market. And then today, it's estimated that there's over 8,000 of them. And it made me realize kind of like, wow, I've had a career that's just been defined almost completely by the rise of data, the rise of Martech. And, I think it's kind of fortunate to be uh, growing in my career as a marketer through those times because there's so much to learn. It's never boring. Um, but anyway, zooming out from kind of my personal experience, um, looking at Martech today, I mean, it's really there to help optimize every element of marketing, from you know creating a PowerPoint presentation faster, or making the branding a lot more scalable, to developing social media banners. Like, these are kind of you know design use cases. And then, of course, there's content use cases, copywriting use cases. I mean, everybody knows about ChatGPT. That is rocking the marketing world. It's not there yet, right? We'll talk about the future in a bit, but it could be there very soon to actually be scalable. And then you have things like, ad tech. And on one hand, the ability to scale out an ad campaign across all these different channels very quickly, from Google to LinkedIn to other third-party like ad display networks. It doesn't have to be a manual setup every time with that kind of ad tech. And then another big trend with MarTech today is personalization. Like, every person is different. Every buyer is different. We all have different interests, different kinds of, profiles that we assume in the world. And there's this kind of belief that the more personalized the message, the more likely someone might convert, especially if it's cold outreach. Like, they don't know you. You don't really know too much about them, but what you do know can kind of be tuned into this personalization. And it's, basically any element of marketing, you can find a corresponding MarTech stack, and it's still developing rapidly. This was certainly not the case 10 years ago when, these MarTech solutions were kind of few and far between.
Yeah, it's really interesting, Scott. And I think you painted a really clear picture on that. So it's interesting to see how MarTech went from being pretty niche to a must-have basically for marketing teams. So that's fascinating. And slowly but surely, Scott, we have arrived at the future. And I love the future. I'm excited about it. And speaking of MarTech specifically, I read a prediction recently that, 95% of all customer interactions could be driven by AI by next year. It feels huge. I don't know if marketers are ready for that shift. I wonder what you think about that. And generally, I wonder what you think about the future of marketing over the next few years.
Yeah, it certainly is an exciting future that we see before us in marketing. A bit scary, depending on your role, thinking about the skills you've cultivated that are very much human skills, potentially being not just co-piloted or augmented with AI, but rather replaced somehow. I'll say more about that in a bit, but yeah, I do think we are headed toward a very AI-enabled marketing future. One of the things about technology, marketing, and the future that's pretty exciting is the emerging sorts of ROI models around marketing investments. Like, it becomes less of a kind of gut feeling or creative pursuit sort of discipline, and more of almost like a math problem. Using the easy example of, $1 million, right? What if there was a way to know that your investment of $1 million would turn into $1.5 million in revenue? I think increasingly we see this potential through the benchmarking, through the just the intelligence of the Martech platforms, where they kind of know what the price point should be for the license, in addition to the price point for the users that are on the marketing team, plus the price point of the ads. And then you add it all together, and they know, Martech companies, SaaS companies, that there needs to be some kind of ROI. So these ROI models are a huge part of the future, a huge part of marketing. And, gaming that out a little bit more, taking that investment in marketing, and thinking about, how it will pay off. Increasingly, there's going to be automation that steps in to take away some of the many manual steps. Like today, building an audience in an ad platform can still be very manual. Actually deploying an ad and uploading the copy and the creative and, that audience, fine tuning it, checking in on it every few days, being a good steward of the company money that you're spending on the ad. All of that takes a lot of manual work. And, it's something that I think, kind of based on machine learning, based on creative focused AI tools, could one day kind of be a set it and forget it sort of thing, much more than it is today, where you've got to check in on that every single day. And it takes a lot of time and a lot of expertise, but this is kind of where I see it headed in terms of making marketing's future more intelligent.
Right.
Yeah.
Scott, and I wonder, are there things you think that will not change in the future?
I think that, if you think about the show Mad Men, where it's all these dudes and ladies sitting around writing copy, just thinking about new innovative ways to sell and position different, B2C sorts of goods and services. Those brilliant folks are still going to be needed in marketing, 50 years from now, just like they were 50 years before this. That kind of breakthrough creativity will still be needed to stand out, especially in a world where, like, I can click a button and generate 25 blog posts, put them on my website, confuse search engines, but still it's enough noise to kind of, get some organic traffic to the site. That's a huge issue that I see emerging. Just like AI creates too much noise. How are we going to stand out in this super noisy digital environment? Well, I think the answer is this breakthrough creativity that is very much a product of the human touch.
Right. I love that. So shout out to all the Don Drapers of the world, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Scott, and I want to ask you, would you give us maybe some examples that you can think of AI in marketing, some things AI related to marketing that you personally are either following or excited about?
Yeah, I have a really good example, I think, from DataArt and the work that we're doing in our marketing team today. So something I've noticed over the years in IT services, B2B marketing, consulting, the industries that I've been in, is just the amount of time it takes to manage knowledge and then reformat that knowledge across different channels. So, for example, you have a case study, some sort of customer story that is really, compelling. Um, but right now it only really exists in the heads of the people who worked on the project, or maybe if you're lucky, somebody wrote down some kind of rough notes about what happened. Um, or even it is a long form case study that you've published on your website. Still, from there, that case study is going to take many, many different forms to be kind of, used to its fullest potential across all these different channels. So, for example, what's the social media version of the case study? What's the email version? What's the slide deck version? And, what's the slide version for this type of client versus another type of client? Because like I was saying before, personalization is key, understanding your target audience is key. And anyway, with those inputs of, this is the kind of format that I want, these are the criteria for the audience, you can imagine basically, 50 different rewrites of one different thing. So with that in mind, what we're creating at DataArt is this kind of knowledge base that has a Gen AI enabled search and then kind of a creative tool on top of it. So what we've done is we've looked through the archives of all of our case studies, all of our brochures, our blog posts, our slideware, and we've put them into what I'm told is called a vector database. This vector database kind of enables the generative AI search on top of it. It brings together all this structured and unstructured data from all these different channels, whether it's internal channels like Confluence and SharePoint, or an external channel like the company website, or even maybe in the future, some form of Google where you can bring in, content of stuff that they've written about our company and other websites. That is to say that the number of sources is almost limitless here in this vector database. Anyway, bringing all that together and then putting a UI on top of it that enables a user who's in, marketing or even sales, like working on a proposal for a certain customer or trying to create some new content, like I was describing with the case study example. Essentially, everything that we have, everything that we've done is there. It's at their fingertips. And it can be, with the help of AI, massaged into all sorts of new formats, whether that's a PowerPoint presentation or some kind of, 2-paragraph summary. It's all possible. And I think you probably kind of know what I mean if you've ever worked with ChatGPT. And by the way, we're exploring how to make this more multimodal, how to make it more kind of branded. So like if you click the button to build the presentation that it spits out is on brand, all these different elements and things that in the past have been very time consuming for teams to treat on like a case by case basis.
Wow, that's a great example, actually. And sounds like a lot of work, but very worthwhile in the end. So it's AI, content creation, automation, but still with the human touch.
Yeah, I mean, there is a human in the loop. I mean, that's a concept in AI where, AI is not 100% there, but if we can get it 90% of the way, and then the human in the technology loop can do the last 10%, saves a lot of time, effort, and then enables, people in marketing to think more about strategy and think more about, kind of this brand element that's been emerging in B2B.
Great. This is a marketer's dream, Scott. Before we wrap up, I do want to ask you, it's a question I like asking our guests, and which is namely, do you have any hot takes or unpopular opinions on the topic of marketing data or future of B2B marketing?
You know what? I think my unpopular opinion is probably going to be very popular with marketers and creatives, but maybe not as popular with some business leaders and the board in an environment where they're trying to, optimize the company. And here it is. So as we were already talking about, I think the demand for these Don Drapers of the world, these amazing creative storytellers and brand builders is not going anywhere. And I really don't see how this is going to be automated in the nearest future, right? So I think marketers and creatives will celebrate this to say, like, yes, we still have a place in the professional society that we helped create, good for us. But then on the other hand, the business, the boards of companies of the world might be a little disappointed because, they want to get those efficiency gains, productivity gains, whatever. And I just don't think they're going to find them in this particular part of marketing where the human touch, the connection with the human experience and the psychology of buyers and all these different places, it's going to continue to be led by humans.
I love that. I love that note. Storytelling is definitely not something that should be completely lost in the numbers. So it's good to hear. And thank you so much, Scott, for sharing your insights today. It was really a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you, Anni. I really enjoyed it. And I appreciate the time and opportunity to talk about marketing, technology, and data. Thank you.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of BizTech Forward. And a huge thank you to our listeners. And if you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, subscribe. And we always want to hear from you. What do you think? Tell us at biztechforward@dataart.com. Till then, take care and we'll see you next year, actually.
Thanks for listening to BizTech Forward. Be sure to subscribe and rate the podcast to stay updated on the latest in business and technology. Join us next time for more insights and forward-thinking discussions. Presented by DataArt.